The glass of the Vance Global Tower penthouse felt like the only thing keeping the roaring, indifferent city of Manhattan from swallowing its owner whole. Billionaire Julian Vance, 50, stood silhouetted against the blinding sunset, the glow of which did nothing to soften the permanent, granite-like set of his jaw. He wasn't watching the view. He was watching the cold, hard numbers scrolling on a specialized tablet display he held like a weapon. Control. That was the only currency that mattered. The board is asking about the Cayman account again. Julian, the voice of Dr. Vivian Cole, his hyper-efficient COO, clipped through his earpiece. They're starting to smell smoke. We need a cleanup action before the end of the fiscal quarter. Julian didn't turn from the window. The reflection showed a man who had built an empire on calculated cruelty and absolute repression. Vivian, you know what cleanup means. It means silence. Cut the funding to the 3 satellite offices in Europe. Reallocate the funds to the Vance Family Foundation tonight. We'll use the charity gala as the cover story for the sudden cash injection. The optics will suffocate any talk of offshore maneuvering. His voice was a low, guttural rumble, the sound of machinery grinding steel. He wasn't asking for advice. He was issuing an edict. The platinum wedding band on his finger, heavy and expensive, glinted as he tapped the screen, finalizing the movement of 9 figures. It was a brutal decision, sacrificing hundreds of jobs for his own reputation, but his expression remained utterly neutral. His marriage band felt less like a symbol of love and more like a shackle, a constant, polished reminder of the one person he couldn't fully control, his wife, Seraphina. Meanwhile, 18 blocks away, in the hushed, velvet-lined halls of her own art foundation, Seraphina Vance, 40, was a study in controlled elegance. She moved among the catering staff and early donors, the emerald green of her silk dress catching the light. Sarah was the public face of Vance philanthropy, a renowned former curator whose deep-set eyes held a pain that no amount of foundation money could ever conceal. She was meticulous, adjusting a single orchid arrangement as if the entire gala's success hinged on its placement. She'd learned years ago how to use beauty as a distraction, how to project an impenetrable image of grace, even while her insides felt like fine china shattering. "The guest list is locked, Sarah," her assistant whispered. "Only the absolute A-list. You look magnificent." Sarah offered a practiced, brittle smile. "Thank you. Just make sure Julian's section is exactly as he likes it. We can't afford any mistakes tonight." The only mistake she truly feared was one she'd made a decade ago, a secret she buried deeper beneath every new philanthropic wing she opened. Tonight, the heavy vintage emerald pendant she wore felt like a lead weight, dragging her down. The fragile piece shattered with a sharp, unexpected voice from the entrance. "Are we really still doing this, Sarah? Another night of parading the gilt money." Elias Vance, her 23-year-old stepson, stood there, a hurricane in a beige trench coat, his short natural hair slightly disheveled. He held a worn, leather-bound journal clutched in his hand, a moral anchor in his privileged, shipwrecked life. Elias had fled the city and his father's money 2 years ago, living a self-imposed exile in a cramped Brooklyn flat, pursuing a Ph.D. in philosophy. His rigid judgment was his weapon, and he wielded it expertly against his stepmother. Sarah's composure instantly wavered. She quickly ushered him into a secluded gallery housing a Rothko. "Elias, you can't be here. The press will be arriving any moment. And it's not gilt money. It's funding for the arts. It's a tax deduction, Sarah. A shield of good deeds to protect Dad from a storm he's been brewing." Elias cut her off, his voice low and vibrating with contained fury. "I saw the news about the corporate restructuring. More people tossed out, more fortunes shuffled. And you just stand here in your emerald cage, looking like the perfect, complicit wife. Do you ever think about him? Does Julian?" Sarah's dark eyes flashed with an anguish that was almost animalistic. "I think about what I have to do to protect the rest of us, Elias. I think about every consequence, every day. You don't know the whole story. You can't possibly understand the kind of power your father holds." She placed a hand on his arm, her touch instantly rejected. "I understand that one mistake was enough to buy his silence and your comfort, Elias retorted, glancing pointedly at her expensive pendant. "And tonight, I finally know what that price was." Just as Sarah opened her mouth to argue, the heavy thwack-thwack-thwack of a helicopter outside rattled the gallery windows, immediately silencing the room and the simmering conflict. Julian was arriving. Sarah closed her eyes for a split second, taking a stabilizing breath that barely worked. Her husband's arrival was never a relief, only an escalation. She looked at Elias, her expression a desperate plea for silence, and she knew she had lost this battle. The family was about to be together in public for the first time in months. 3 people united by billions, separated by a single, unforgivable secret. Julian Vance stepped off the landing pad, his dark figure immediately framed by the flash of early paparazzi lights. He walked toward the foundation doors, his face a mask of cold, predatory charm, ready to perform the role of the devoted philanthropist. Elias watched him, his journal tight in his fist, a judge waiting for the verdict. The silence between the 2 men, separated by Sarah, was not peace, it was the prelude to war. The gala was less a celebration of art and more a meticulously choreographed performance. As Julian and Seraphina Vance stepped across the threshold, the low hum of conversation swelled into an appreciative applause. They moved in perfect, mirrored synchronicity. Julian, the picture of tailored power in his charcoal suit, his hand resting proprietarily on Sarah's spine. Sarah, radiant in emerald, her smile fixed but dazzling. They were the golden standard of American dynasty, built on technology and burnished by culture. A dazzling lie the public happily bought. Every touch, every glance exchanged for the benefit of the cameras, was a perfectly delivered line in a play they both despised. Julian leaned in as they paused for a photographer, his voice a chilling murmur only for her. "Your dress is flawless, Sarah. Your tension is not. Straighten up. We need the headlines to read philanthropic power, not marital strife." "My tension is the result of seeing our son tonight, Julian," she hissed back, her smile not budging. "He's fragile. He knows something is wrong." "He knows what I allow him to know," Julian corrected, dismissive. "He's a student. He reads books, not SEC filings. Ignore him." But Elias wasn't ignoring anything. He had slipped away, disappearing into the cold, industrial white of the service corridors, a stark contrast to the opulence of the main gallery. He pressed his back against the wall, his heart hammering against his ribs, and held his worn journal close. He wasn't hiding. He was strategizing. He pulled out a burner phone he kept solely for one purpose and dialed a number he knew by heart, the contact for a woman who had worked for Vance Global before a severe scandal forced her out. "It's me. Did you get the transfer notification I flagged?" Elias whispered into the phone, his voice tight with anticipation. "The one from Vance Global Tech into the foundation? The timing is what I need to know. Was it before the news broke about the corporate shakeup?" He waited, chewing the inside of his cheek, the silence on the line stretching into an unbearable minute. "Yes, Elias. Less than an hour before. It's a calculated shell game. He's liquidating assets to shore up his personal reputation before the market responds. That money is tainted." The confirmation slammed into Elias with the weight of physical proof. He closed his eyes, a profound sorrow mixing with his righteous anger. It wasn't just a corporate lie. It was his father, once again, placing financial security above any moral code. Tainted money. The phrase echoed his deepest fear, that their entire lives were built on something rotten. Back in the main hall, Seraphina was deep in conversation with Senator Hayes, one of the foundation's largest benefactors, discussing a future art acquisition, her territory, where she felt safe and competent. Julian, who had just finished a cordial but meaningless chat with a competitor, watched them for a moment, his jaw tightening as he observed Sarah commanding attention. He swooped in, placing a hand on the senator's back with a proprietary air. "Senator, I'm so glad you could make it," Julian cut in, his smile flawless, his hand pressing into Sarah's shoulder. "Seraphina was just telling me about the smaller pieces she's looking at for the next show. She sometimes forgets that our donors prefer scale. We need spectacle, darling, not subtlety, remember." The comment was subtle, delivered with a chuckle, yet it instantly undermined Sarah, dismissing her expertise and asserting his dominance in front of a key player. Sarah's face flushed a deep crimson, not just from embarrassment, but from the searing realization that Julian was not just being possessive. He was tightening the screws, reminding her who held the actual power, even in her own domain. Then, the true blow landed. Senator Hayes tilted his head conspiratorially. "Julian, I have to say, that's a brilliant tactical move, dumping those European assets today. The sudden liquidity, the immediate reinvestment into your foundation, its genius damage control. Very quick reaction to the rumors." Sarah froze. She hadn't known the transfer was public. Julian hadn't just used the gala as a shield. He had made her an unwitting, complicit part of his corporate scandals cover-up. The weight of his control crashed down on her. Julian simply smiled at the senator, acknowledging the compliment as deserved, completely unconcerned about the human cost. As Julian took the stage for his prepared remarks, a carefully crafted speech about integrity and global responsibility, he scanned the room, his eyes automatically seeking out Elias. He needed to know the boy was compliant, present, and silent. He found him tucked away, near the back, looking down at his phone. Julian started his speech, the words flowing with practiced sincerity, when his own phone, tucked into his jacket pocket, vibrated once, a single, sharp burst. Julian discreetly pulled it out. It was a message from an unknown number, the number Elias had just used. The message was a single cryptic word: Garrett. The blood drained instantly from Julian's face. The word was a decade-old scar, a secret so buried he hadn't allowed himself to think it in years. His rehearsed speech about integrity faltered, the perfect mask cracking. He looked up, his eyes meeting Elias's across the ballroom. Elias wasn't angry anymore. He was cold, triumphant, a young man who had finally found the thread that unraveled the empire. Julian swallowed hard, his throat suddenly dry, the world spinning around the single, devastating realization that his son knew the name of the man who had truly died because of him. The speech died on his lips. The glittering veneer of the gala shattered the moment Julian Vance crumpled slightly on stage, his hand flying to his chest in a perfectly timed, yet genuinely felt, moment of panic. Dr. Cole, ever present, rushed the stage, announcing a minor cardiac episode due to exhaustion. It was a spectacular diversion that successfully masked the real cause, the sudden, terrifying resurgence of the name Garrett. Within 15 minutes, the opulent ballroom was clearing out, the guests murmuring about the great man's frailty, completely oblivious to the venomous conflict brewing beneath the surface. Julian didn't allow for a hospital visit, only immediate, forced isolation. He insisted they take the company helicopter directly to the Vance compound upstate, a sprawling, glass and steel fortress nestled deep within the Hudson Valley wilderness. The compound, meant as a retreat, always felt like a gilded prison. Julian sat across from Seraphina in the cabin, the silence punctuated only by the rhythmic thwack of the blades, his expression cold and furious. Elias sat furthest away, staring out the window, his journal still clutched in his hand. "Garrett," Sarah finally stated, her voice sharp despite the noise. She leaned forward, the exhaustion visible beneath her makeup. "Who the hell is Garrett, Julian? And why did hearing that name nearly stop your heart on a stage full of cameras? Don't you dare tell me it's a business name." The look on your face was terror. Julian scoffed, his eyes glacial. "You've spent 10 years telling me we buried the past, Sarah. Now our reckless son conjures up some ghost, and you instantly believe it?" Elias is grasping at straws to justify his pathetic rebellion. "Elias is a moral philosopher. He seeks truth, Julian," Sarah countered, her voice rising. "And I seek the truth for my husband. Is this about the Vance global scandal a decade ago? The one where that young analyst went missing after he threatened to expose the internal audit? Is he him?" Julian's controlled mask finally cracked, revealing the raw fury underneath. He slammed his hand onto the leather table, making the crystal glasses jump. "Do not dredge up that mud. You want to talk about secrets, Seraphina? Let's talk about your secrets. You've been running this foundation for a decade, building your reputation, doing your good works. Do you really think I don't know why you needed that money laundered through the foundation after your little issue in London? We both have blood on our hands, and mine, at least, keeps this entire empire from collapsing. He twisted the knife with surgical precision. He wasn't talking about Garrett anymore. He was talking about the incident years ago, before their marriage, when Sarah, then a fiery young curator, had faced a career-ending crisis involving a forged artifact and a panicked, questionable cover-up of her own. He had saved her then, and he had never let her forget the cost of his silence. Sarah recoiled, her face white. That was before we were married. And it was a mistake. I wasn't trying to cover up a man's disappearance. You promised me we were clean after that. You promised me Elias would never know the truth about anything. Her voice broke on the last word, the pain of his betrayal sharper than any physical blow. In the back, Elias didn't stir, but his face was pressed so tight against the window that his breath fogged the glass. His hands, however, were not idle. He had subtly positioned his phone in the cabin's mesh pocket, its recording app silently capturing every word, every accusation, every painful admission. He hadn't known the full truth, but the fragments he was hearing now, missing analyst, London issue, laundered money, blood on our hands, were coalescing into a horrifying, detailed picture of his family's moral rot. They weren't just ruthless, they were criminals, bound by shared guilt. He knew then that the fight wasn't just about his father's company. It was about the very soul of the man he had believed to be his savior when he was younger. The helicopter landed with a jarring thump on the immaculate compound lawn. Julian stormed out first, not waiting for anyone, the silence he left behind filled with toxic air. Elias stopped recording, his fingers trembling as he saved the file. He had the evidence now, the confession, the ammunition. But the cost of firing it would be destroying his entire family. He looked at Sarah, sitting frozen, the emerald dress now looking like a winding sheet, and he felt the profound, wrenching loneliness of being the only one holding the truth. The Vance compound was designed to repel the world, and in that it succeeded spectacularly. The air inside the vast, two-story living room was sterile and cold, dominated by floor-to-ceiling glass that offered a spectacular, yet utterly isolating, view of the darkening woods. Julian paced, too agitated to sit, pulling out his phone to immediately confer with Dr. Cole. His public persona had taken a hit. Now it was time to eliminate the domestic threat. "Vivian, I need you to audit Elias's recent communication history," Julian ordered, his voice echoing slightly in the immense space. "Focus on any external contacts, specifically former employees who left under duress. I want a profile on that woman who was dismissed after the internal audit 10 years ago. Find out if she's been talking to him. I need to know exactly how much he knows about Garrett and how he found the name." Dr. Cole's face appeared on the giant screen across the room, efficient and unperturbed, a pillar of corporate loyalty. "Understood, Julian. Initiating a full digital sweep now. We'll contain the narrative before it spreads beyond the family." Seraphina watched the interaction, standing silently by the modern fireplace, drawing no warmth from the flames. This was Julian's default mode. When threatened, he didn't seek reconciliation. He sought eradication. She couldn't listen to another second of his cold calculation. She murmured a vague excuse about needing a quiet moment and retreated down a long, glass corridor to her private study. Her study, filled with books and personal artwork, was the one room in the house that felt authentically hers, a small refuge from Julian's taste. As she entered, she noticed a small, plain brown envelope tucked discreetly beneath a heavy art catalog on her desk. It had not been there when they left days ago. Her heart pounded as she reached for it, her fingers trembling. The envelope was unmarked, unsealed, and bore no postmark. Someone, a ghost from the past or a nervous accomplice, had been waiting for the house to be empty, waiting for Julian to be distracted. She tore it open. Inside, nestled beneath a single sheet of paper, was an old, slightly faded photograph. It was a picture of three people, smiling broadly, taken at a university function years ago: a younger, carefree Julian, a Seraphina who still possessed genuine light in her eyes, and a third man, handsome and earnest, with a familiar kind face, his arm slung casually over Julian's shoulder. Handwritten on the back in faint ink was the name, Garrett, May 99. The name was finally attached to a face. Garrett wasn't just a corporate victim. He was a friend, Julian's college roommate, the analyst who had trusted him enough to reveal the initial fraud. The man Julian had destroyed. The paper accompanying the photo was a printed email, a panicked, decade-old exchange between Julian and an off-the-books security consultant, discussing the containment of the evidence and the construction of a flawless corporate alibi. Sarah gasped, clutching the photo and the email to her chest. She had always known Julian was ruthless, but she hadn't known the victim was someone they knew. She hadn't known the conspiracy ran this deep. The realization sickened her. She wasn't just complicit in a cover-up. She was covering up the betrayal of a friend. Just as she stuffed the evidence into her dress pocket, Elias appeared silently in the doorway, his silhouette framed against the corridor light. He looked at her, his expression heavy with pity, guilt, and determination. He told me to leave the house. He said he's giving me a choice, silence or I'm cut off, Elias said, his voice quiet but intense. He's terrified, Sarah. And that means he's dangerous. Sarah could only shake her head, tears finally stinging her eyes. Elias, you don't know everything. I just found this. Julian didn't just make a man disappear. He made a man, his friend, look like a criminal to protect his lie. I know the lie, Sarah, Elias corrected her, taking a step into the room. I know he paid a firm to fabricate the forged accounting documents that framed Garrett. I know he set the whole thing up, and I know why you helped him with the money afterward. His voice was flat, devoid of emotion, a man reciting a horrific truth. The price of your comfort was silence, and the price of his empire was a man's entire life and reputation. Julian's voice boomed from the living room, sharp and aggressive. Elias, get back here. We're talking about your future. Elias ignored his father's summons, his eyes locked on Seraphina. You need to give me that photo, Sarah. You need to give me that email. Because I can't let him do this again. I can't let him win. He had thrown down the gauntlet, asking her to choose between the life of luxury she knew and the moral absolute he demanded. The tension in the room was electric. Julian was about to arrive, and Sarah held the smoking gun. The sudden, authoritative force of Julian Vance entering the study was like a physical blow. He stopped dead, recognizing the posture of conspiracy instantly. Elias stood defiantly. Seraphina looked utterly wrecked, her hand clutching the pocket holding the hidden evidence. The air was thick with the scent of betrayal. Julian, despite the earlier shock, was a machine of survival. He locked the door behind him with a low click. What is this, a late-night intervention? Elias, put the journal down. We're going to discuss your future, and I am going to make sure you have one, Julian stated, his voice now dangerously calm. Seraphina, tell your son that this adolescent tantrum ends now. Elias didn't flinch. He reached into his pocket and, with a decisive movement, pressed a button on his phone. The study, usually a quiet sanctuary, was instantly filled with the jarring sound of the helicopter's thwack, 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 followed by Julian's own voice, raw and accusatory. You want to talk about secrets, Seraphina? Let's talk about your secrets. Do you really think I don't know why you needed that money laundered through the foundation after your little issue in London? We both have blood on our hands. Julian froze, the blood draining from his face once more, not because of the accusation itself, but because the private conversation, his confession, was now a cold, undeniable digital fact. His eyes darted to Elias, then to Sarah. You recorded me? Julian's voice was a low snarl, the fury barely contained. You think a spliced-together snippet of a marital argument is going to destroy a $12 billion enterprise? It'll be dismissed as a bitter, post-gala spat, Elias. This is amateur hour. He strode toward Elias, attempting to grab the phone. Elias backed away. It's not just the argument. It's the context. The issue in London was covering up your friend's murder and framing him for fraud so you could take over his projects and build your company faster. Garrett was the price, Dad. And now I have the evidence to prove the forgery and the money laundering. The word murder hung in the air, paralyzing Seraphina. Julian stopped his advance, breathing hard, his mind racing, searching for the one lever he knew could move the immovable. He looked past Elias, locking eyes with his wife. "Seraphina, listen to me," Julian said, his voice dropping into a desperate, intimate register, a tone he hadn't used in years. "This is the moment. You want to protect Elias? You want him to graduate. You want him to have a reputation, a life that isn't destroyed by a public scandal that will tear us all apart? I can make the Garrett situation go away. I can ensure this recording disappears. But if you give Elias that evidence, if you choose the moral high ground now, they won't just come for me. They'll come for him. They'll audit his finances. They'll look at his connections. They'll expose every weakness. He won't survive the scrutiny I will ensure falls on him." Julian stepped closer, his voice soft, predatory. "Choose, Sarah. Your son's moral purity or his future. Protect him or destroy him." The choice was impossible. A cruel Sophie's choice delivered in a velvet room. Sarah looked at Elias, seeing his stubborn, beautiful adherence to truth, and she saw the fragility beneath it. She saw his rigid moral code as a target, not a shield. She looked at Julian, the architect of her misery, and knew he was right. The empire would crush her son's soul if he tried to fight it. She made her choice, and it was a devastating act of self-betrayal. She reached into her pocket, not pulling out the incriminating photo and email, but instead, she withdrew a small, heavy velvet box. She opened it, revealing a spectacular, flawless canary diamond ring. The ring Julian had given her years before, the one she had always claimed she kept for sentiment. "Julian," she whispered, her voice cracking, "you're right. Elias needs to stop this. He doesn't have the stomach for this fight. He doesn't have the whole story." She turned to Elias, her eyes cold and distant, a mask of the complicit wife sliding back into place. "Your father is correct. Your noble truth-seeking is going to destroy everything he has built, and everything I have built to protect you." Elias stared at her, horrified. "Sarah, what are you doing? After everything you heard?" Sarah looked at Julian and then back at Elias, her heart breaking inside the polished shell of her exterior. "I am protecting the legacy. And you, Elias, are not the truth-teller you think you are. You're just a pawn." Her eyes shifted to Julian, delivering the deeper, true betrayal that would silence Elias forever. "I know about Garrett. And Elias, what your father won't tell you is that I was the one who fabricated the forged receipts that led to his firing, not Julian. I did it before we were married, to secure my own position in the art world, and Julian simply used it later to frame Garrett. I was the one who started the lie." She offered the canary diamond ring to Julian, a symbol of her final, complete submission. "I am yours, and this is my confession. The fight is over." Elias's jaw dropped. The moral compass he trusted, Seraphina, had just confessed to being the original source of the lie. His champion was his father's deepest accomplice. The air went out of him. He looked from his defeated stepmother to his triumphant father, the fight draining away instantly, replaced by a profound, agonizing disillusionment. The stillness of the Hudson Valley night descended like a heavy cloak, sealing the tragedy within the glass walls of the compound. Elias Vance walked out alone, slamming the compound's heavy front door behind him without a word of farewell. He hadn't been exiled, he had fled. His stepmother's confession, that she was the original architect of the lie that had destroyed Garrett, had done more damage than any financial cutoff. It hadn't just broken his heart, it had shattered his core belief in moral rectitude. He climbed into his beat-up black sedan, the worn leather journal and his phone, containing the silenced confession, tossed onto the passenger seat. He didn't look back at the illuminated fortress of his family. He drove, not knowing where he was going, only knowing he had to escape the toxic air of their shared guilt. The son who sought truth had been defeated by a lie crafted out of twisted love and self-preservation. Inside the study, the silence that followed Elias's departure was suffocating. Julian stood triumphant, holding the canary diamond ring that Seraphina had surrendered. He had won. The scandal was contained. The son neutralized, the wife compliant. "You did it," Julian said, his voice flat with exhaustion, not exhilaration. "You saved us. The evidence is neutralized. You gave him the closure he needed, even if it was a lie." Seraphina, her emerald dress now looking faded and crumpled, walked to the immense window, staring out at the woods where her son had disappeared. "It wasn't closure, Julian. It was destruction. I didn't just lie to him. I destroyed his faith in the one person who stood for something decent in this marriage. I confessed to an act of moral cowardice that was never mine, just so he would stop fighting you." She turned, her dark eyes blazing with a cold fire that Julian had never seen before, a terrifying calm after the storm. "The truth is, Julian," she continued, her voice low and steady, "you are absolutely right. I am complicit, but not because of London or because of Garrett. I am complicit because I stayed. I am complicit because I watched you become the man you are, and I chose to live in this golden cage. I confessed to a lie in order to force Elias to back down, because you would destroy him before you destroyed your company. And I will never forgive you for making me choose your survival over his innocence." She paused, and the weight of her next words was devastating. "You have absolute control now, Julian. But look around you. You have a marriage that is a corporate arrangement. You have a son who hates you and believes his mother is a fraud. You have billions, and you are utterly, terrifyingly alone. You won your control, but you lost the one thing you were fighting for, your own humanity. And that," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper, "is a fate worse than any prison." Julian stood there, the canary diamond glinting uselessly in his hand, and for the first time in years, the ruthless CEO saw the man beneath the tailoring, a desolate, victorious ghost. The control felt hollow. Seraphina had protected Elias, yes, but she had simultaneously inflicted a wound on Julian that no amount of money could suture. Seraphina, however, had one last move. While Julian was lost in his hollow victory, she retrieved her phone. She didn't call a lawyer. She called Dr. Vivian Cole's personal number. "Vivian," Seraphina murmured into the phone, her voice completely drained of emotion. "It's Sarah. We both know where Julian keeps his secrets. The files on the Garrett case, the ones detailing the transfer and the forgery. I want you to make 2 copies. One for me. The other, you send the original untraceable envelope to the address listed under Elias Vance Emergency Contact, legal in my foundation files. Make sure it arrives tomorrow morning. Julian may have won the battle for Elias's silence tonight, but he won't win the war for the truth. This is the only way to save him, Vivian. Please, do this one thing for me." Seraphina pressed send on a separate, cryptic text message that contained only the name Garrett and an obscure account number, directed to a private investigator she had been vetting for months. Miles away, Elias was driving through the pre-dawn glow of the city's outskirts, the asphalt humming beneath his tires. The only light inside the car came from the street lamps. He pulled over, parking at a desolate overlook, and opened his worn leather journal. His rigid moral certainty was gone, replaced by a terrible, painful clarity. He picked up his pen, writing a new definitive entry on a clean page, his hand shaking slightly in the cold morning air. His entry wasn't an accusation. It was a promise. They are both complicit. My mother, for a past I don't understand. My father, for a crime he engineered. The system protected them both. I sought the truth. I found the betrayal. I am no longer a philosopher. I am now the witness. The war begins when the silence ends. Gee. He closed the journal, placing it back on the seat. The silence was over. He was going to find out what really happened to Garrett, and he was going to expose the real enemy. Thanks for watching. More stories are coming soon.